Sir Cliff Richard was not only a musical icon who dominated the charts for 6 decades, but also one of the greatest enigmas in the history of British entertainment. In his 80s, while many of his contemporaries had long settled into family life, this eternal bachelor continued to leave the world curious about what truly lay behind the doors of his private mansion. In the dazzling world of rock and roll, where fleeting marriages and high-profile divorces were commonplace, Sir Cliff Richard stood out as a striking anomaly. For more than half a century, the public grew accustomed to the image of a polished star, free of scandal, who consistently claimed to be married to music. Yet the curiosity of his fans never faded. They kept asking, could any heart truly be cold enough to reject love? Or was Cliff Richard simply a master at concealing his most private emotions? Speculation intensified more than ever when revelations emerged about the silent companion who had been associated with him for over 3 decades. It was neither a film star nor a glamorous socialite, but a unique bond that unexpectedly reshaped the public's perception of him. To understand why Cliff Richard chose such a mysterious way of life, we must go back to 1940 in Lucknow, India. Born as Harry Roger Webb, young Harry carried memories of the Far East and a strict educational upbringing, before later transforming under the lights of London's stage into Cliff Richard, a man who combined the irresistible charm of rock music with the rigid discipline of a devout Christian. Harry Roger Webb, Cliff's birth name, grew up under the care of an intensely strict religious family. His parents, Roger and Dorothy, were deeply devout and maintained strict moral principles from their years in India through to their later life in England. In their household, politeness and discipline were not merely habits, but absolute rules. Young Harry was a model student who always respected authority, yet deep inside him there existed a quiet current of longing for freedom. The biggest turning point came when the wild sounds of rock and roll from across the Atlantic began reaching Britain via radio broadcasts. For a teenager raised under strict moral discipline, the roar of electric guitars and driving drum beats felt like an irresistible force. Harry secretly began listening to Bill Haley and Elvis Presley, becoming captivated by music that the media of the time dismissed as moral decline. Behind the appearance of a well-behaved boy, this hidden passion for rebellious rhythms began to burn, turning music into the only space where he could truly be himself. This internal conflict created a uniquely distinctive Cliff Richard. He carried the explosive energy of rock and roll while maintaining the elegance of a refined gentleman. This unusual combination of fire and water allowed him to avoid the destructive excesses that consumed many of his contemporaries. When Harry Webb abandoned his birth name to become Cliff Richard, he was not merely changing an identity, but beginning a journey to awaken an entire nation with a completely new musical image. Music powerful enough to make an impact, yet respectable enough to earn the approval of even the most conservative parents. In 1958, while Britain was still struggling with traditional ballads and the dominance of American music, Cliff Richard emerged like a lightning strike that shattered the silence. With the hit Move It, he did not merely release a song, he created what is widely regarded as Britain's first true rock and roll record. It was a historic moment when a domestic artist proved that the British could produce music that was just as fiery, energetic, and capable of driving young audiences into excitement. Cliff Richard's journey became a lesson in adaptability and extraordinary survival within an entertainment industry known for its ruthless elimination of artists. He never allowed himself to be confined to the image of a British Elvis. From the raw rock and roll energy of the late 1950s, Cliff smoothly transitioned into the polished pop sound of the 1960s. As time progressed, he continued to reinvent himself through rockabilly, the fashionable disco rhythms of the 1970s, and powerful emotional ballads throughout the 1980s. This versatility ensured his name never felt outdated, always maintaining relevance with new generations of audiences. However, what truly gave depth and distinction to Cliff's career was his transition into contemporary Christian music. This was not simply a stylistic change, but a profound expression of his inner voice, showing that his career was never solely about numbers or trends. Cliff used music as a means to express his spiritual principles and moral values. His unwavering commitment to faith, even within the temptations of the entertainment industry, transformed him from a pop idol into a symbol of sincerity and endurance, allowing him to remain at the top for over 60 years. As successful as his career was, Cliff Richard's private life became a series of regretful choices. There were women who entered his life, people who once seemed capable of holding the heart of this eternal bachelor forever. Cliff Richard's life became a rational equation of trade-offs between personal happiness and complete dedication to fame. For him, love always seemed secondary to contracts and public expectations. The first woman to touch his heart was dancer Dahlia Wicks in the early 1960s. They shared a secret relationship, a sincere romance that eventually ended when Cliff realized that his expanding international career required him to remain a national bachelor icon, rather than become a family man. The greatest regret of Cliff's bachelor life was arguably Jackie Irving. She was the only woman he ever admitted might have changed his destiny. Yet at the point of marriage, Cliff Richard made a decision so coldly pragmatic that it shocked many. He ended the relationship due to fears that marriage would reduce his fan base by 25% to 30%. That calculation revealed a deep-rooted fear of being forgotten, leading him to choose loneliness at the peak of fame, rather than risk his position for domestic happiness. By the late 1970s, his most public and emotionally open relationship with tennis star Sue Barker once again became the center of attention. Although he felt deep affection and rare respect for Sue, Cliff repeated his familiar pattern, admitting that he could not place her above his touring commitments and a performance career still at its peak. Even with Olivia Newton-John, with whom he shared an undeniable sense of chemistry and mutual respect, Cliff also chose to step back. He admitted that his heart had been stirred, but instead of fighting to claim that love, he chose a dignified silence, knowing her heart already belonged to someone else. These women gradually passed through his life, leaving Sir Cliff Richard eternally belonging to the public, yet emotionally empty within his own home. However, when his relationships with women faded into silence, a very different figure appeared and remained by his side for 3 decades, becoming an answer to the long years of quiet behind the mansion doors. The emptiness left by his broken relationships with these women was eventually filled by a presence that was quiet, yet far more enduring than anything Cliff Richard had previously experienced. In the early 2000s, the world began to take notice of a man who constantly appeared beside Cliff at important events but never sought attention. John Mlynn, commonly known as John McClellan. A former priest, John carried a calm and understanding nature that led Cliff to invite him to live with him at his residence in Barbados. Their connection was not merely companionship, but a deeply rooted emotional support that lasted nearly 30 years under the same roof. Cliff Richard, always reserved with the press, did not hesitate to describe John as his companion and the rock of his life. In the unpredictable and often superficial world of show business, John became a peaceful refuge, someone with whom Cliff shared simple dinners, quiet prayers, and the overwhelming pressures of fame. The presence of a man in the home of the eternal bachelor naturally fueled long-standing speculation about Cliff's sexuality. But in the face of public scrutiny, he chose complete silence, regarding it as a sacred part of his privacy. Yet fate eventually struck a heavy blow to the aging legend. In late 2022, John passed away, leaving a vast emotional void in Cliff Richard's life. Although he did not display his grief publicly, those close to him reported he was deeply emotionally devastated. With John gone, he did not only lose a housemate, but also the final anchor that kept him emotionally balanced. John McClellan's quiet passing closed a mysterious yet meaningful chapter of his life, leaving Cliff more isolated than ever in the twilight of his career. Living under constant scrutiny and curiosity from the world, Cliff Richard nevertheless maintained an astonishing sense of composure, what enabled him to withstand decades of judgment over a life of lifelong singleness. For him, choosing a single life was not an act of sacrifice or failure, but a conscious decision to protect absolute personal freedom. Cliff has often stated that he would rather live alone, fully in control of his own space and time, than become trapped in an unhappy relationship or a marriage shaped by social expectation. This sense of freedom allowed him to devote himself entirely to his art and the missions he believed he had been destined to fulfill. However, the strongest foundation that enabled Cliff to withstand life's pressures has always been his unwavering Christian faith. As a committed Christian, every decision in his life, from selecting songs to personal conduct, and even his choice to remain single, has been filtered through a strict moral and religious lens. He views his life as a form of service, and his lack of family obligations as a condition that allows him to serve both his faith and his audience more fully. Faith has not only provided comfort in his loneliest moments after John's death, but has also served as a guiding principle that helped him preserve a sense of purity in an entertainment world often criticized for moral decline. This philosophy, combining personal freedom with religious discipline, has made Cliff Richard a figure who cannot easily be shaken. He does not seek validation from the world regarding his happiness, as he finds fulfillment in his spiritual connection with God and in the unconditional love of his audience. His singleness, therefore, is not a void, but a symbol of steadfastness and loyalty to the path he chose in his youth. Yet even after striving to keep his life as clean and private as possible, Cliff Richard was not spared from intense attacks by the media. Throughout his career, Cliff Richard built a solid wall to protect his private world, but even that wall was occasionally shaken by the harshness of modern journalism. The most painful moment came in the landmark legal case of 2018, an event that permanently changed how British media approached celebrity privacy. It began when the BBC chose to broadcast live footage of police searching his private residence over allegations relating to the past, allegations that were later proven to be entirely unfounded. Seeing helicopters circling his apartment and his private life being broadcast on national television was a traumatic shock that left Cliff in a state of severe emotional distress. However, instead of remaining silent, the eternal bachelor demonstrated remarkable determination by taking the BBC to court. His decisive victory not only cleared his name and resulted in substantial compensation, but also delivered a powerful warning against intrusive journalism. Cliff proved that even as a public figure, he retains the right to a private space that must not be violated. Cliff Richard can be described as a master of privacy. He understands how to control mystery itself, giving the audience just enough music and charm to spark curiosity, while never allowing anyone to fully access his true identity. This secrecy is not escape, but a deliberate way of preserving dignity and inner peace in a world constantly hungry for scandal. From Harry Webb in India to one of Britain's greatest music legends, Cliff Richard's journey remains an enduring enigma. His story demonstrates how a person can exist at the intersection of extremes. The glamour of the stage and the deliberate silence of private life, the rebellion of rock and roll and the discipline of deep religious faith. Cliff Richard did not choose a life shaped by public expectation. He chose singleness in exchange for freedom, faith in exchange for peace, and silence in order to protect those he loves. In the end, regardless of public speculation, his greatest legacy is not only a catalogue of chart-topping hits, but a life lived with clarity, conviction, and self-respect. Is the price of lifelong singleness and absolute privacy too high when measured against lasting musical fame? In an era where everything is exposed through social media, does Cliff Richard's mysterious way of life offer a valuable lesson about protecting personal identity?